Welcome back to part 4 of The Problematic Prince. Now, without further ado, let's continue with the story. Erna said she wasn't mad about the trouble he caused. She was okay with it because he helped her before. Erna stayed quiet, but was still a bit upset. Bjorn asked if they were even now. Bjorn mentioned Erna's careful thinking and suggested they call it a fair deal. Then he took his hand off Erna's shoulder, which made her feel better. But suddenly, he gently touched her hand. This surprised Erna, and she asked what he was doing. Prince Bjorn said he looked forward to seeing her again. He smiled at Erna, making her blush. People nearby couldn't believe what was happening. The prince's actions caused whispers among them. Two of his friends were frustrated, asking why he acted uninterested at first, but then made a move. They wanted to know what he said to Erna and if he planned to meet her again. Prince Bjorn got annoyed with his friends talking and told them to mind their own business. One of his friends couldn't believe Bjorn was taking the bet seriously, saying it showed how greedy rich people can be. The other friend questioned how he could flirt with another woman right in front of his ex-wife just for some money. They asked Bjorn about his plans and worried about how his actions might affect Erna Hardy. Bjorn, looking at his friends with contempt, called them pathetic and reminded them that the bet was their idea because they said they cared about Erna Hardy. This made them uneasy about the situation. Suddenly, a nobleman who had been thinking about going to the art show arrived with his student Pavel Lore, the winner of this year's art contest. He proudly introduced Pavel as the most talented artist at the academy, hoping to show him to the prince. What they didn't know was that Pavel is Erna's childhood friend. Pavel greeted the prince respectfully. However, Bjorn noticed Pavel seemed more like a soldier than an artist in his manner. Prince Bjorn returned the greetings and said he looked forward to seeing Pavel's future work. Pavel thanked the prince graciously. While they chatted, the prince remembered Pavel's name in connection with Erna and their meeting in the garden. Meanwhile, Erna still held her hand, remembering the tingling feeling from the prince's kiss on her hand. Suddenly, Pavel came across his childhood friend Erna, and he was completely shocked to see her again after so many years apart. Pavel called out to her, and his voice startled Erna. She was thrilled to see him again after so long. They were both amazed they had found each other, and Erna was surprised by how much Pavel had grown into a handsome and respectable man. Pavel greeted Erna warmly, expressing his delight at their long-awaited reunion. Erna, with a glowing smile, acknowledged that it had been quite some time since they last met. Pavel returned her smile warmly, expressing his joy at this unexpected encounter. However, Pavel's teacher called for him, signaling his departure. As he left, people nearby whispered about meeting again later, filling Erna's heart with happiness. Erna thought back to Pavel's familiar smile, glad to see he hadn't changed over the years, and she looked forward to their next meeting eagerly. Because of her encounter with him, she was able to push aside the troubling events of the day. Later, Erna came back home and began writing letters to her suitors, blushing as she remembered the prince's kiss on her hand. Lisa, holding a lovely bouquet, joked if they were trying to fill the room with every flower from Shumber. She questioned whether the young men knew how to read and why they persisted even after being turned down. Lisa suggested Erna didn't need to reply to all of them, but Erna insisted on writing back to each one, remembering her grandmother's advice about a lady's grace and politeness, even in rejection, which meant a lot to her. Erna asked about any other letters, and Lisa, realizing she meant Pavel's letter, sadly informed her that was all she had. Seeing Erna's eagerness for that letter, Lisa teased her gently, making Erna blush and hurriedly clarify it wasn't as important as it seemed. That night, Erna found herself thinking about Pavel. 3 days had passed since they met again, and she hadn't heard from him. She wondered if he was just busy, convincing herself that nothing bad could have happened to him. She held on to the hope that he would reach out to her soon. Erna couldn't shake off the memory of seeing Pavel and the feeling of Prince Bjorn's kiss on her hand. The sensation of that kiss kept her awake, and she blushed as she lay in bed. Meanwhile, at night, Bjorn enjoyed a drink with his friend. The prince grinned, teasing his friend about his upcoming marriage. His slightly intoxicated friend replied dismissively, telling Bjorn to take his trophy and go. With a smirk, Bjorn left, continuing to joke with his friends about the challenges of dealing with their new wives. The atmosphere in the bar was lively, with everyone getting drunk. People admired Bjorn's ability to drink, seeing him as a real party animal. They couldn't remember the last time they saw him lose at a bachelor party. They wondered if he enjoyed getting everyone completely drunk during these parties. One of his friends mentioned that Bjorn had a reputation for hating to lose a bet. They assumed he must have numerous such trophies at home, although they weren't quite sure where they all were. In fact, they suspected he even won on his own bachelor night. Later that evening, Erna strolled through the quiet streets of Shubar. The night was serene, with few people around, and she found comfort in the peaceful atmosphere. She realized she had only ventured out because of a nightmare earlier. Thoughts of Pavel had been occupying her mind since their reunion. Despite her reservations, there were moments when Erna deeply wished to converse with Pavel. These thoughts lingered in her mind. Suddenly, Erna noticed a drunken Prince Bjorn lying beside the famous fountain. His state surprised her, and she initially couldn't recognize the collapsed figure. Approaching Bjorn, she asked about his well-being, offering to call for help if needed. Bjorn stirred at the sound of her voice and saw Erna's face. It was then that she recognized him as Prince Bjorn. Groaning from the drinks, Bjorn reached out and grabbed Erna, causing her to step back in surprise. He seemed out of sorts. He was taken aback to see Erna Hardy again and assumed she had been following him, finding her persistence surprising. Bjorn thought about Erna's actions, recalling how composed she had seemed earlier when discussing fair deals. He wondered why she was following him again today. The prince, with slightly slurred speech from alcohol, asked Erna why she was out so late at night. In response, Erna noticed the strong smell of alcohol on him. Annoyed and alarmed, she yelled at him to let her go and threatened to scream if he didn't. However, Bjorn pulled her closer and repeated his question, demanding to know her reason for being out at night. Erna felt pain in her hand from Bjorn's tight grip, but asserted that it was a public square and she had the right to be there. The prince chuckled at her response, leaving Erna trembling with anger and shocked at his absurd behavior. She offered to get help if he needed it, but Bjorn believed she was pretending to be innocent. He was convinced that women like her hid malicious intentions behind their innocent looks, and he suspected this might be what she was waiting for. With audacity, Prince Bjorn asked Erna if she was willing to be sold off by him, implying that rumors were already spreading. This enraged Erna even more, and she shook with anger at his words. Erna found the prince's behavior too forward for a late-night encounter, feeling confused about his intentions. She asserted her strength to Bjorn, but found the conversation offensive and unpleasant, demanding that he release her. The prince suggested negotiating a deal and asked about her value, further provoking Erna, who questioned if he knew when to stop. In response, he asked if he seemed like someone who would stop. Erna couldn't believe how the man who was once the crown prince had deteriorated. Then, she noticed Bjorn wobbling, and suddenly, he collapsed with a loud thud, both of them ending up on the ground. Erna screamed for help as Bjorn had passed out from drunkenness. Nearby people approached, and Erna saw Bjorn's trophy on the ground. She picked it up and gently nudged the prince with it to check if he would respond. One bystander who came to help witnessed Erna using the trophy on the prince, leaving them both shocked by the situation. The next day, Lisa told Erna about a letter from Pavel, which surprised her because she wasn't expecting it so soon. Excitedly, she opened it and found out Pavel wanted to meet at the Archduke's bridge. Erna was thrilled. She'd finally see her childhood friend Pavel again. She imagined sharing everything that had happened during their time apart, the thoughts and feelings she couldn't talk about with anyone else. But Erna couldn't forget her unsettling encounter with the rude prince. The night he aggressively grabbed her still bothered her, making her feel uneasy. She also remembered Lisa's warning about the prince, comparing him to a poisonous mushroom. At first, Erna didn't understand, but now she got it. The prince's behavior was indeed toxic and harmful. Meanwhile, at Prince Bjorn's mansion, the butler grew worried about the prince's injury, suggesting they call a doctor. He noticed the wound was worse than they thought and asked how it happened. Prince Bjorn assured the butler he was fine, playing down how bad the beating was. The butler was shocked that anyone would dare hurt the prince and wanted to know who did it. With a smirk, the prince hinted that it was someone he saw as a savage, and he couldn't help but think of Erna. He found the whole situation audacious. Later, Prince Bjorn went to his office to deal with paperwork. That's when he got an interesting letter and invitation from House Harver, which belonged to his great-aunt. He was surprised to hear from her and figured it was that time of year when she showed off her connections. The prince decided against declining the invitation and instead told the maid to let House Harver know he'd be coming to the event. The head maid was visibly shocked by this, as it was unusual for the prince to accept invitations. She reminded him that his aunt, Marchioness Harver, liked to invite everyone, even Gladys. The prince knew his great-aunt loved throwing lavish parties and inviting all her contacts to see the spectacle. He realized she wouldn't miss the chance to invite someone who was the talk of the town. Also, with the new arrival, Erna Hardy, causing a stir with the gossip mill, the prince was sure Erna would get an invitation too. The head maid was surprised the prince still wanted to go, especially knowing that both Gladys and Erna would be there. His decision caught her off guard. In response, the prince explained that he felt like everyone was expecting some entertainment, so he should at least do one good thing. He acknowledged that his dear great-aunt didn't have much time left due to her chronic illness, and he wanted to bring her joy for as long as she was still around. He assured the head maid that he wouldn't stress his aunt out too much. The head maid was furious at the prince's seemingly insensitive remark about his aunt's illness. In the background, Bjorn also thought attending the event would be a good chance to catch the trophy thief, whom he suspected was Erna. He smiled as he pondered what kind of retribution he might demand from the little thief to feel satisfied. Meanwhile, at sunset, Pavel waited for Erna. He couldn't believe it was really her he saw. He knew she was a big topic in high society, along with the former crown prince and princess. According to the articles, she was depicted as a materialistic woman who cared only about finding a wealthy husband. Pavel was puzzled by what had happened since he left and never expected to find her in Lechen. Pavel was struck by the profound transformation of a countryside girl into a refined lady within a year. His reverie was interrupted by Erna's distant call, her beauty unchanged, accompanied by her maid. Despite the passage of time, Pavel couldn't help but reminisce about the Erna he once knew, leading him to chuckle nostalgically. Erna inquired if Pavel preferred to be addressed as Mr. Korchlor once more, but he declined, insisting on being just Pavel, her old friend for the day. Erna responded with a radiant smile, prompting a mirrored expression from Pavel. As they clasped hands, remembering their past friendship, Lisa saw this as a poignant moment, feeling as though she were witnessing a scene from a television drama. Eventually, with a solemn demeanor, Erna sought solace in confiding her father's intentions to marry her off for financial gain to Pavel. Expressing her reluctance towards marriage, Erna felt her father's duty overshadowed her desires. This revelation left Pavel visibly concerned, as Viscount Hardy's intentions appeared transparent. Pavel grasped the disheartening truth that Walter, Erna's father, prioritized financial gain over parental responsibilities, intending to auction off his daughter. Despite his anger, Pavel realized his limited ability to intervene. Meanwhile, Bjorn sat down to write a letter to his great-aunt, feeling content with the morning's update from Freyr Bank. He anticipated making a nice profit if things continued going well. The only thing left was getting ready for his great-aunt's upcoming ball. However, as he glanced out the window, he spotted Pavel and Erna casually walking together. He couldn't help but notice how happy Erna seemed with Pavel by her side. Bjorn was surprised, realizing that the red-haired man was definitely Pavel Lore. A mischievous grin crossed Prince Bjorn's face as he entertained some less than noble thoughts. He guessed that while Erna was mingling in high society, looking for a suitable husband, she was secretly enjoying the company of a young artist. To him, it explained why some people were calling her the next Gladys Hartford. He found the whole situation ridiculous. After Pavel offers to walk Erna home, she assures him that Lisa will be accompanying her. She thanks Pavel for the enjoyable day and for offering to help her find a place to sell her artificial flowers. Pavel brushes off any concern and mentions that he also had a good time. He wishes Erna a safe journey home and tells her to reach out if she ever needs help. They part ways and head home. In a flashback, Pavel's father advises him to stop visiting Baron Varden's place, marking a turning point in their lives. They're no longer children, and Pavel agrees with his father. Rumors have started spreading about him, the son of a lumberyard owner, and the Baron's granddaughter from a fallen noble family. For appearance's sake, they need to distance themselves from each other. He must view her only as a sister. There can never be anything more between them. That's why it ends here. He sets a boundary, and he must stick to it. Later that night, Prince Bjorn visited his great-aunt, who warmly welcomed him and remarked on how long it had been since their last meeting. She mentioned that Gladys was at the gathering, and Bjorn guessed that his younger siblings hadn't made it. As they chatted, he noticed Erna nearby. His aunt encouraged him to greet Gladys and told him she had forgiven him. She thought they should reconcile and lead more respectable lives, warning that his current lifestyle would affect his health as he aged. Ignoring his aunt's advice, the prince walked up to Erna and greeted her with a playful nickname, Gold Thief, which surprised her as he approached. Perplexed by the nickname, Erna asked what it meant, feeling uneasy around the prince. Bjorn then asked if they could talk privately. However, Erna refused, still holding on to resentment for his actions that night. Bjorn, not one to shy away, accused Erna of being arrogant, especially since she had taken something from him. He demanded to know what she had done with his trophy. Erna, feeling perplexed and annoyed, insisted she had no idea what he was talking about and asked him to leave her alone since people were starting to stare. But the prince wouldn't let it go, insisting he'd leave her alone once she returned the trophy she took from him. Erna remained puzzled, unable to understand why he was calling her a thief and treating her this way. She asked him to explain his behavior. Bjorn stuck to his accusation, claiming Erna had stolen something from him in his eyes. Erna was shocked by his words, finding it hard to believe he would insult her like that. Observing Erna's apparent selective memory, Bjorn pointed out that she conveniently forgot certain things that didn't suit her. Erna's annoyance escalated as she questioned what Bjorn was trying to accomplish. She believed the awful experience she had endured with him the other night should have been enough, yet here he was, being rude to her once again. She couldn't understand his behavior and suggested he might have been too drunk to remember what had happened. Regardless, she found his actions and words completely unacceptable. Bjorn reassured Erna that he did remember the events of that night, leaving her shocked and speechless. The memories of that incident, when the prince had fallen onto her, rushed back to her mind. Prince Bjorn openly admitted that he remembered everything that had happened at the Tara Square fountain. Erna felt embarrassed and was at a loss for words. The prince acknowledged that he had crossed a line and offered an apology, taking some responsibility for the incident. He then made a gracious gesture and suggested that it was now Erna's turn to apologize. Erna's anger surged as she demanded to know what she was being asked to apologize for. Prince Bjorn suggested she apologize for attacking him with his own trophy and then stealing it before fleeing. Erna's memory was triggered, and she finally recalled the incident. She remembered seeing the golden rod on the ground, and now it all came back to her. Bjorn noticed Erna's silence, realizing she had recollected the incident. He asked what she had done with his trophy, and after a moment of thought, Erna remembered feeling uncomfortable with the trophy having touched the prince. She explained that while walking down the street, she had tossed it away. The prince was surprised to hear she had thrown the trophy away and questioned why she had done so. Erna explained that she had thrown the trophy onto the road while walking home, but then they both heard music in the distance. Prince Bjorn noticed it and realized what was happening. Overwhelmed with tears, Erna didn't know what to do. However, Bjorn, still holding her hand, suggested they join the dance for now since the music and guests were already dancing. This surprised Erna, but she eventually understood his suggestion as the music and the guests set the mood for dancing. Then, Erna admitted to Prince Bjorn that she couldn't dance. He responded that their conversation was going to be a long one, and hiding behind the stone column would only attract more attention from everyone present. With no other choice, Erna took Prince Bjorn's hand, and they stepped onto the dance floor. Everyone at the ball, including Lady Hardy, was staring at them. Lady Hardy looked despondent and trembled with sadness on her face, but Prince Bjorn simply smiled at her. To him, seeing Gladys's expression at that moment, he feels rather grateful to Erna. Erna asks if the trophy was really made of gold, and he confirms that it was. She's shocked that she didn't realize it was real gold that night. With that, she promises to repay him for it. She explains that she can't give him the money right away, but if he gives her some time, she'll do whatever it takes. The prince grins and agrees, satisfied with how things are unfolding. It feels like he's holding a winning hand in a card game with a straight flush. Prince Bjorn realizes that Erna isn't as naive as he initially thought. She seems to be a lady who understands the basics of a fair trade, making their little game much easier to navigate. The prince suggests that her payment could be repaid by dancing with him at the ball. They take to the dance floor, and as they move together, they look like a married couple. Their dancing not only makes everyone in the room a little jealous, but also brightens up the atmosphere of the ball. As they danced gracefully, Erna remained focused on her steps, recalling the lessons her grandmother had taught her about becoming a proper lady. Meanwhile, Bjorn observed Erna closely. Her innocent demeanor made him wonder if all of this was just an act. He considered that if it was a calculated plan, then she must be the most skilled actress in all of Lechen. In the distance, Gladys watched the scene, and she, too, had once been even more naive, at least on the surface. Bjorn couldn't help but enjoy the sight of Gladys as he grinned. He felt a sense of gratitude toward Erna for helping him create a perfect scene in front of the largest possible audience. With a serious expression in her eyes, Erna and the prince couldn't help but enjoy the dance. As the dance came to an end, everyone below them erupted in applause, impressed by the marvelous performance. The prince praised Erna for the wonderful dance and told her that she could take her time repaying him for the trophy, whispering to her discreetly. A beautiful smile graced Erna's face as she thanked the prince, causing a slight flutter in his heart. And with that, I conclude part 4 of this wonderful story. What will happen next? Now that Bjorn and Erna are getting closer, will there come a time when they will be dating? How about Pavel? Since Erna and Pavel are childhood friends, are they going to end up together? Tune in next time for part 5 of this series. Thank you for watching.